We must do something.
The Senate Judiciary Committee held hearings on gun violence today, with former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords making an emotional plea to pass legislation, while the NRA said the focus should be on prosecuting the laws already on the books. Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal knows something about both perspectives, having been on the scene in Newtown, Connecticut the day of the Sandy Hook shooting, and having worked as a federal prosecutor and attorney general. We met him in his office after today's hearing. When you were speaking at the hearing today, we were out here in your lobby, and as soon as you came on, the phone started ringing off the hook, and we understand that it was almost entirely people who support gun rights and are afraid that legislation, what was discussed today, could, take their guns away. How is it that, depending on the poll, 2/3 of Americans support many of these measures, and yet 80% of the people calling your office are screaming at your receptionist?
I've learned in my first 2 years here, I'm still new to the job, that very often the folks who call or write or email, and we welcome every one of them, are not necessarily representative of the majority opinion. And I have to make a decision on the basis of what I think is the right thing to do. I lived through the aftermath of the Newtown tragedy. I was there within hours of the shooting, and I saw firsthand the grief and pain, the terrible hurt that horrific tragedy caused for the families, as well as for the community, the first responders, police, the way it shook that community, and really, I think, shook the conscience of America. So I think there has been a sea change in popular opinion.
Of course, the impression many people get when they hear about all these calls is that that's the very well-organized, well-funded, very motivated NRA working its will, as it has for a long time in Washington. Do you think that's different? You really think this is going to get done?
I believe very sincerely that something will be done during this session of Congress. I may be naive or over-optimistic. As I said, I'm still new, but I really see a very strong basis in popular opinion, which I think folks in this place have to heed.
Last thing, you talked about being in Newtown on that terrible day, which really spurred this debate we've had over the last few months. And I wonder if that memory and the emotions that stirred up are the right things to keep in mind as we're passing legislation, or we need to be more dispassionate when making the law?
Well, that's a good question. I think those memories and the terrible grief and hurt of this experience are right to have in mind. And Newtown ought to be a call to action. It ought to sustain a sense of urgency. But we also need to know what works and what doesn't work. And so I think it's a question of being both passionate and objective.
Let me just ask you about one other measure that was a big topic of discussion today, high-capacity magazines. Should they be reduced, and do you think that can get through?
High-capacity magazines have a very good chance of passage, and the reason is quite simply, as Mark Kelly said today, young Christina, 13 years old, was killed by the 13th round fired by James Lochner. If the magazine had been limited to 10 clips, she might well, in fact, very probably, would be alive today because he couldn't load the second magazine. Same in Newtown. The shooter there had clips with 30 rounds each. And the time that he saved by using a high-capacity magazine probably enabled him to massacre more children than he would have otherwise. So the truth here is, the lesson is that these laws can make a difference. Very likely, 26 wonderful people, 20 beautiful children, and 6th grade educators would be alive today if we had adopted some of these measures before now.
Senator, thank you.
Thank you.